things in Tamriel that cannot be mapped, not with ink, not with memory, not even with time. Historians speak of years. Kings of eras, but the gods. They speak in echoes, and once, just once, the echo grew louder than time itself. There was a moment, or 1,000 years, where all truths were true, where war was both won and lost, where empires rose, fell, and rose again all at once, where history forgot how to walk straight. The scholars called it a mistake, the faithful a revelation. Others, a warning. They named it the Dragon Break. Not a war, not a place, but a fracture in reality itself, caused by gods, by machines, or perhaps by something far older. This is not a tale for the wise, it is a tale for those who dare to question time itself and wonder, what happens when it breaks? The calendar lies. For most of Tamriel, history is a line. From the founding of cities to the fall of kings, it moves forward, clean, defined, easy to trace. Or so we like to believe, but the truth is more fragile than the paper. It's written on. In the earliest days of the Third Era, an ambitious project was undertaken, the Encyclopedia Tamrielica, a compendium of all recorded history since the fall of the Aelids. It was intended as a gift to the new emperor Tiber Septim to give structure and order to the chaos that came before him. But as with many things written in the early days of empire, the foundation was flawed. The root of the error lay not in ambition, but in ignorance. The Alessian Empire, long dead by that time, had left behind a trail of broken monuments, scattered scrolls, and the scars of a theocracy that burned more libraries than it ever built. Much of what came before had been erased either by war, zealotry, or time itself, but the compilers of the encyclopedia tried anyway, and in doing so they made an assumption that would unravel the very fabric of history. They believed the Alessian order ruled for over 1,000 years, specifically 1008. Suspicious number, clean, rounded, almost symbolic, but where did that number come from? The answer, buried in the dust of ancient ruins and the ramblings of half-mad monks, was this. The Alessians did not record time the way others did. They followed what they called the vision trance calendar, a system where years were not counted by the turning of seasons, but by the length of the trance visions of their high priestesses. These trances could last weeks or months, sometimes longer. And when a priestess returned, she would mark her revelations as an Alessian year. The cycle was spiritual, not seasonal, metaphysical, not chronological. To them, time was not a path, it was a state of awareness, but the scholars of the Third Era didn't know that, or didn't care. They saw the scrolls, they counted the years, and they declared the Alessian Empire ruled for over a millennium. From that one mistake, that one misreading, came everything else. Generations of historians repeated the error. They filled textbooks, gave lectures, and passed the lie into tradition. The gap in the timeline became accepted truth, and over time people began to ask, what happened during those 1,000 years? They looked for battles, for kings, for events. They found nothing, and that void, that silence in the record, became a breeding ground for something stranger than history. Belief. Cults emerged, theological orders. Scholars with obsessions and prophets with visions, each trying to fill the gap, each claiming they'd found the truth behind the missing millennium. Some said the gods had descended, others claimed time had frozen. A few whispered of Numidium, the brass god, and how its activation had fractured time itself. The most radical among them offered a different explanation. The Dragon Break, a moment when all possible outcomes happened at once, a reality where contradictions didn't cancel each other, they coexisted, where Talos both ascended and did not, where battles were both lost and won, where Tamriel became a prism, splintered, multiplied, and reborn. At first, it was treated as heresy, but over time it gained weight because no one could prove it false. And so a simple misreading, a misinterpretation of a priestess's trance, became the seed of a doctrine that would shake the foundations of Nirn. The truth is, the calendar lied. But the lie became so deeply embedded in the bones of history that even now many believe it was no mistake at all, that the gap was real, that the world broke, and that we are all living in what came after. The rise of the break doctrine. Once the lie of the calendar took root, faith rushed in where fact failed. The so-called gap of the 1,008 years that had never happened became more than a scholarly anomaly. It became a vacuum, and vacuums never stay empty in Tamriel. Not when cults breathe myth as easily as air. It began on the fringes. Quiet temples, reclusive monasteries, isolated Daedric sects. But as the Third Era wore on and the reign of Uriel Septim VII became increasingly chaotic, the doctrine of the Dragon Break moved inward, infecting universities, courts, and even the Elder Council. The central claim of the doctrine was not just radical, it was blasphemous. The break, they said, was not a blank. It was everything. According to them, during this missing time, the laws of causality collapsed. All choices made and not made occurred at once. The world branched, split, echoed, and rebounded within itself. And when it was over, every possible version of history had happened. Tiber Septim both activated the Numidium and didn't. He became a god and remained a man. The empire rose and shattered. And yet, when the break ended, time snapped back like a whip. Not to the truth, but to the most dominant narrative. A single path was chosen by force of belief, not objective fact. Reality, they claimed, is not built on what happened, but on what was believed to have happened. This idea struck at the heart of historical tradition. It terrified scholars, it empowered mystics, and worst of all, it explained things no one else could. Because throughout Tamriel's history, there were gaps. Inscriptions that contradicted one another. Battle reports that had both sides claiming victory with evidence to prove it. Tombs of generals who'd died in multiple wars, hundreds of years apart. At first, these were seen as errors, later as fakes, but now they were symptoms. Symptoms of a world that had once been torn apart and then hastily stitched back together. The rise of the Lorcan cults gave the doctrine structure. Where scholars had theories, the Lorcanites had faith. To them, the break was no accident. It was divine design, a trial set forth by the trickster god himself. A reminder that linear time was a lie and that the mortal mind could never fully grasp the true shape of reality. They taught that the Numidium, the brass tower built by the Dwemer and later wielded by Tiber Septim, had been the spark that shattered time, that its activation did not simply bend history, it fractured it into infinite shards. But where others saw horror, the cults saw freedom. If time could be broken, then fate could be challenged. If history was fluid, then so was destiny. And if a mortal could cause such a break, then what else might mortals be capable of? The Empire, of course, denounced these beliefs as dangerous nonsense. But the Septims, oddly enough, remained silent. Some claimed it was fear, others believed they knew the truth, and that Tiber himself had lived through the break and remembered it. Whatever the case, the Dragon Break doctrine only grew stronger. By the end of the Third Era, it was no longer a theory whispered in temple shadows. It was a belief system, a cosmic philosophy, and a political threat. It inspired fanatics and frightened kings. It rewrote history books and shattered faith in the so-called truth. And it posed one terrifying question: if every possibility can be true, then what does truth even mean? A war that happened and didn't. Most wars end with certainty. A victor, a surrender, a date etched in stone, but the war born within the Dragon Break left no such certainty behind, because every version of it happened, and none of it did. Those who believe in the Dragon Break often point to the Battle of Hunding Bay, said to have taken place near the end of the Second Era. Or was it the beginning of the Third, or both? Accounts vary wildly. In one version, the Empire's legions were outnumbered 3-1, but still emerged victorious, thanks to the divine intervention of Talos himself, who split the sea with his voice. In another version, the Empire was crushed. The Numidium malfunctioned, entire cities were swallowed by a wave of unbeing, and the Imperial Navy vanished without a trace. In yet another, the battle never happened at all. It was a fabricated myth, a cover for a diplomatic surrender, brokered in secret between Tiber Septim and the leaders of Hammerfell, and yet each version has witnesses, each has artifacts. Each is recorded in scrolls, etched into walls and sung in local legend. If all are true, then none are lies. If none are lies, then truth itself becomes fragmented. That is the legacy of a Dragon Break war. During the break, cause and effect became divorced from one another. Choices no longer had a single outcome. They had all outcomes. Tiber Septim both activated the Numidium and did not. The Empire both conquered Tamriel and failed to unite it. The gods intervened and remained silent. Imagine a tapestry torn into countless threads, each thread continuing a different story. Some tragic, some triumphant, some absurd. Now imagine those threads all woven back together as if nothing had happened. That's what the end of a Dragon Break feels like. The world moves forward, pretending that history is still linear. But underneath, the fabric is twisted. It left behind warriors who remembered victories no one else recalled. Cities that had ruins older than their founding dates. Tombs of heroes who died twice, in battles centuries apart. And then there was the most haunting legacy of all, those who remembered everything. They are few. Scholars call them break-touched, and their minds are shattered. Some speak in riddles, others fall into comas. A rare few survive with fragments of understanding, but they often vanish soon after. Some believe they are taken by the gods, others suspect they are erased by powers that cannot tolerate such memory. What's certain is this: during the Dragon Break, war was no longer just blood and steel. It became a spiritual battlefield where belief shaped outcome and where time itself was a casualty. The Numidium, central to so many conflicting accounts, is often blamed or praised, a weapon unlike any other, forged by Dwemer arrogance and used by a mortal who would become divine. Some say its activation was the match that lit the fire. Others argue it was simply the tool of a greater will, Lorcan's perhaps, or Akatosh's, or something nameless and old. What's terrifying isn't just that the war happened differently for everyone, It's that afterward, no one could tell which version won. Because in a dragon break, victory is not universal. It is personal. A general may return home bearing the scars of a battle no one else remembers. A widow may mourn a husband who was never declared dead. A shrine may be raised to a hero whose deeds were erased from history, yet still honored in dream. This is the price of possibility without consequence, and it leaves a question burning in the hearts of those who dare to ask, if all outcomes are real, then who decides which one the world remembers? When all truths were true. To understand the dragon break, one must abandon the comfort of logic, not twist it, not bend it, abandon it. Because within the break, the laws of time, causality, and linear thought no longer apply. Reality does not move forward. It blooms outward in infinite directions. Every possibility becomes fact. Every contradiction becomes true. It is not a paradox. It is Tamriel in its rawest form. During the break, time becomes a kaleidoscope, and mortals trapped inside it see themselves through 1,000 shattered reflections. They act, die, live, succeed, fail, all at once. And yet from the outside no time has passed at all. It is said that only the gods truly remember what happens during a dragon break. But even they do not agree on what occurred. Vivek claimed to have seen 12 versions of himself kneeling before the heart of Lorcan, all simultaneously. Azura speaks of a dream within a scream. Jigalag, Prince of Order, denies the break altogether, which may be his only lie. To the mortal mind, these claims are nonsense, but to those who lived during the break, about those rare few touched by its truth, there is only one word that makes sense of it all. Everything. Everything happened. Every path walked. Every choice made and unmade, and yet, in the end, only one version was remembered. Why? Because when the break ends, reality must choose. Or perhaps it is chosen for it. Some say it is the will of Akatosh, the god of time. Others claim it is Lorcan, laughing from beyond the stars, who lets the world shatter, and then watches what pieces fall back into place. Still others whisper that it is belief that binds the timeline, that whichever version is most widely accepted, most firmly remembered, becomes the dominant thread. In this view, history is not what happened, it's what we agree happened. And the rest? The other versions, they are buried in the subconscious of the world only as dreams, myths, madness. This is why across Tamriel there are conflicting prophecies, contradictory records, overlapping lineages. A king in Daggerfall who was crowned twice. A battle in Morrowind that ended 3 different ways. A god who was both born mortal and never mortal at all. These are not errors, they are echoes, remnants of truths that once were but no longer are, except in memory. Some scholars call these temporal bruises, others refuse to acknowledge them at all, fearing what such recognition might unravel. Because if you accept that all truths were true, then how can anything be certain? How can a religion survive when its gods changed mid-prayer? How can an empire stand when its foundation may have crumbled in a version no longer remembered? And worse still, what happens when someone remembers too much? There are legends, mostly suppressed, of individuals who retained knowledge of the break. Not scholars, not mages, common people, soldiers, children. Some went mad, others vanished. A few became prophets, but spoke in riddles no one could understand. In one such tale, a child in Elsewhere recited events from two entirely different timelines. One where her village was destroyed, another where it prospered. She remembered both perfectly. She died in her sleep the next night. Her heart stopped, though her body was untouched. Another story tells of a priest in Cyrodiil who wrote the same sermon every day for 40 years, each one completely different, yet all claiming to be the original. These may be myths, but then again, so was the dragon break until it wasn't. This is what happens when all truths are true, when time has no anchor, when memory outweighs fact, and Tamriel still bears the scars. The fool who denied it all, in a world where time once shattered and truths became infinite, one man dared to say, none of it happened. His name was Faldrune, a scholar of the late Third Era. A man of letters, records, and well-bound books, not a prophet, not a priest, historian, or so he claimed. His treatise, The Dragon Break, re-examined, was written in calm ink and careful arrogance. It dismissed every myth, crushed every contradiction, and boiled the entire mystery down to one damning conclusion. The dragon break was a clerical error. According to Faldrune, the so-called 1008 years of the Alessian Order, the period where time supposedly collapsed, was nothing more than a misreading of religious calendars. He argued that the Alessians didn't track years like the Empire did, but by the length of mystical trance states entered by their priestesses. A single trance could last weeks, months, or more, and each one was counted as a year. By this logic, the Order didn't rule for a millennium, it ruled for barely a century and a half. A simple error copied by scholars, repeated by scribes, passed down until tradition became gospel. To him, the dragon break was not divine, not catastrophic, not real. It was a fantasy born of poor record-keeping and religious hysteria. He even went so far as to call it a myth perpetuated by cults, fools, and power-hungry mystics. In some circles, his work was praised. Empire officials saw it as a relief, an escape from uncomfortable contradictions. It helped stitch order back into history, giving a single thread to follow, rather than an infinite tangle of reality. But others were not so convinced. Many whispered that Faldrune's name was a joke, a cipher used by another, hiding behind the mask of skepticism. His name, after all, is an anagram. Darn fool! Coincidence? Or confession? Some believe his treatise was deliberate misinformation, a cover-up written to suppress what truly happened. After all, a world where all truths were true is a terrifying thing. It's easier to call it madness, to call it a myth, to blame a typo. Yet even Faldrune could not explain the temporal scars. He could not explain the contradictory tombstones, the overlapping bloodlines, or the scholars who disappeared after researching the Numidium. He could not explain the dreams, the visions. The break touched. He wrote his book, he published his findings. He dismissed the gods, the myths, the voices in the void, and then he vanished. No one knows how or when. No grave, no death record. Only a final note in the College of Whispers archive. Research terminated, subject lost. What remains is his book. Still found in dusty libraries, still cited by those who need the world to make sense. But every so often someone finds a margin note, a scribble, a correction, one that wasn't in the original edition. It reads, Wati if I was wrong? And beneath that, what if I still remember? The time that shattered itself. So what is the dragon break? A clerical error? A divine storm? A god's joke whispered through eternity? Perhaps it was all of them. Perhaps it still is. Some say it never happened. Others say it never stopped. They debate in halls of marble and cathedrals of dust, searching for a single answer in a story that never had one. But one truth echoes louder than the rest. Tamriel remembers what it chooses to. Not always what is real, but what is believed. And in those moments, when belief outweighs truth, when memory bends the shape of history, reality is no longer linear. It spirals. Time becomes legend, and legend becomes time. If you've heard the echoes and felt the weight of what may or may not have been, then let the stories continue. Subscribe to Tales of Tamriel and walk with us into the places history forgot to write.